So my name is Kyla Benson. I'm the Director of Events here with the East Colorado Small Business Development Center, and want to thank everybody for joining us today on September 1st, this wonderful afternoon. We're very excited to have Carli with us here from Symmetry Consulting, ready to discuss how to hire a rock star. Throughout this presentation, we again invite you to go ahead and submit any questions you have via the chat feature, and questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So stay on and stay active so that we can get all of your questions answered. Carli, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you to get started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kyla. My name is Carli Seeba. As I like to joke, I'm a recovering attorney. I've been doing HR law for many years, and I'm with a group called Symmetry Consulting. Many of you might have heard my boss, my mentor, Carolyn, speak before, and she has an illness in the family, so she's out today. So I am filling into her very big shoes, and I hope I do it justice. Symmetry, we provide HR services to our clients, so that's everything from hiring to employee management, to up through termination, workers' comp claims, unemployment, basically the entire life cycle of an employee. Today we're going to talk about the first part of that, how to hire a rock star. And from what I understand, some of you have employees currently, and some of you are looking to hire your first employee shortly. Hiring an employee is always a big step, and it's a lot of weight on your shoulders because you want to find somebody that's going to fit personally with your business and have the skills and abilities to do the job. One of the statistics I like to throw out early is, depending on the industry and the profession, when you hire somebody new, it can take up to 18 months for that person to basically net out. The training costs that go into that person, the startup costs, all of that, they need to stay on that job 18 months for them to begin making money for you. So that's a big responsibility, a year and a half, and in some industries it can be as long as 36 months. So making the right decision when you hire is very important. I like to call these hires your rock stars. What does that mean? The first part is they have to fit into your company culture. Company culture is one of those things that is very intangible, but it's the feeling you get when you walk in an office. Are you conservative? Are you more laid back? How do you communicate with each other? I have one company that they don't do a lot of face-to-face meetings. They only do things via email. So to fit into the culture, you have to be very competent and very comfortable with communicating via email. Another story I have about that, I was hiring a young woman for a customer service job, did a phone interview, fantastic. Met her in person, she was lovely. She had all the skills and abilities. However, I was hiring, this job was in the funeral industry, and she had blue hair and a nose piercing. She might have been very capable and able to do the job, but she just was not going to be that fit for that button-down funeral industry culture. The second part of a rock star is that they can obviously do the job. You want somebody who's going to take the initiative and not just do their job and come in and clock out, do their 8 to 5. You want somebody who's going to go above and beyond. Somebody you're not going to have to supervise. You're not going to have to point from A to B to C to D. You can give them a task and they can run with it and they know exactly what they need to do. The last piece of that is they need to share the same goals as you, the business owner. You want somebody who wants the same things at the end of the day. They want the business to succeed, because somebody who has those same goals is going to be driven the same way as you and following the same path. A pitfall I see a lot of small businesses fall into is they want to hire a relative or friend. And I'm not going to discourage a person from doing that, but there's several things you probably should think about and be aware of and plan out ahead of time if you decide to go that way. The reason a lot of small businesses like to go the relative and friend route is, one, they know their capabilities. You've known your friend Susie for 10 years. You're going to know what they're about. They're also probably familiar with the business. You're having a drink over wine. You come home to them at the end of the day. They know what it's about. Oftentimes, they're less expensive. They're willing to take a pay cut because they know you. And so you can get them maybe at a little cheaper price. If it's someone who's married, a familial relationship, there's tax benefits to hiring somebody in a family. They also have a strong commitment to the business owner because the relationship just isn't on a business level. It's also on a personal level. So their drive to succeed might be a little bit more. That said, there's a lot of risks as well. it can be really difficult to fire your friend or a family member. I had one client, the office manager, her sister-in-law was the receptionist, and we had a lot of problems with the sister-in-law. She had a lot of performance issues, and it was very difficult to not only reprimand her, but ultimately we had to fire her. It was very, very hard. They take advantage of their status as well, and this is what the sister-in-law did. She knew which buttons to push and how far to push them, and so she got away with a lot that she probably shouldn't have, and another employee wouldn't have. Disagreements at home can also interfere with work. I have another client whose husband owns the company and the wife works for it. And oftentimes I'll hear from the other employees in that company complaining that the husband and wife are bringing their disagreements and arguments to work. And not only does that harm your relationship because you're not able to get away from each other, but it's also bringing all these other employees into that relationship, so to speak. And so it can be detrimental to really all those relationships around you. It can destroy the friendship or family relationship. The example I was giving earlier about the office manager and the sister-in-law receptionist. The sister-in-law's husband, so the office manager, it was her brother. The brother was hospitalized, very severe. They weren't sure he was going to live. The sister-in-law didn't even call the sister, the office manager, because she was still so upset about being terminated. So it really destroyed that relationship, and then they're still in the rebuilding process. They can see each other at Thanksgiving now, but that's about it. Cheap labor isn't always the best. Sometimes you get what you pay for. And again, it's difficult to confront that relative or friend when disciplinary issues happen because, again, you have a deeper relationship than just the business. People become very defensive, they take it personally, and so that can really damage and harm those relationships. So if you do decide that maybe you want to hire a friend or relative, think these things out beforehand because you don't want to be taken by surprise when you have actually hired them and they're working for you. Think about how you'll handle these situations because I hate to say it, I've been doing this long enough, these issues happen more often than not in my experience. So plan it out ahead of time. So you decided to hire somebody, we're going to go outside the family. The first step you need to do in hiring an employee, a job description. These are legal documents that every employer should have for every employee. This is what's going to help protect you if there's a lawsuit, anything of that sort. So really make sure you have these and that they're tight and legally compliant. What should be contained in the job description? The first part is what's the title? Is this administrative assistant 1? Is this an office manager? What is the title of this position? Who do they report to? Do they report to you? Do they report to the office manager? The start date, when this position is starting. A summary of what the job is. And I like to divide this into two parts. The first part, I like to do the 30,000-foot view. A couple sentences. This is the primary responsibility. These are the secondary responsibilities. Keep it very high level. The second part I like to do is to include the soft skills. So these are things like attention to detail, able to see the bigger picture, works well with others. Those sort of nebulous concepts that aren't definitive tasks or responsibilities or skills, but that are important to the job. The next thing that should be included in the job description is the primary responsibilities. This is where you get into the nitty-gritty. You want to list each responsibility or duty that this job is going to be responsible for. If you already have somebody in the role, I would suggest having them collaborate with you on what their primary responsibilities are, because there might be some things they do that you were unaware of. One caution I like to throw in here, oftentimes I review job descriptions and people like to throw in a duties as assigned at the end as sort of a catch-all. The reason we suggest not to do that, there was a lawsuit actually here in Denver several years ago, U.S. Bank. What I sense happened is the employee wanted a raise and he went to his boss. The boss said, rob a bank, joking, being sarcastic. The employee went and robbed a bank. When the employee was arrested, he says, well, my employer told me to. And I know this sounds so ridiculous, but his job description had duties as assigned. So that employer had to spend a lot of money hiring an attorney to fight this. They won in the end. It was kind of a frivolous lawsuit, but again, they had to spend a lot of time, energy, and resources fighting this. So if you have something you do these as assigned or those broad catch-alls, I really suggest you remove those and put more specifics in. I also always make sure to include work hours and work location. Another kind of weird lawsuit to tell your friends over drinks sometimes. This was up in Michigan or Wisconsin, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was a war nurse, and she was doing her work, but she wasn't coming into the office. She was working from home. Well, they fire her. She comes back and sues and says, nowhere on my job description does it say I actually have to be in the ER. She actually ended up winning. So make sure you put the work hours and the work location where you expect this person to be and when. And then finally, compensation. How much is this person going to be paid? At this point, I'm going to kind of digress just briefly and talk a little bit about misclassification, just for a few moments. Misclassification, there's two different kinds. The first kind is when employee or independent contractor. Make sure you're categorizing these people correctly. Contractors are those things that are incidental to your business. So I'm in the HR industry. Someone who fixes my computer would be an independent contractor. Another HR manager like myself should not be an independent contractor. They need to be an employee. And there's an entire checklist of things you need to go through. Are they exercising independent judgment? Are they under your control? Things of that nature to determine if they are truly an employee or independent contractor. Just something to keep in mind if you want to classify people as ICs. I highly, highly caution you to have that reviewed by legal counsel or an HR firm or someone like myself, just to make sure you're classifying them right. The other type of misclassification comes from exempt and non-exempt. Exempt are those people who are exempt from overtime, so generally your salaried workers. Non-exempt employees are the ones that get paid overtime, generally hourly. What I want to just kind of caution, because this is coming on the horizon as of December 1, December 1. Right now, to be classified as exempt employee, there's several things that an employer has to satisfy for them to be exempt from overtime. Their job duties have to meet a certain standard. They need to be managing people. They need to have responsibilities that go above and beyond. So one of the examples the Department of Labor actually gives is the ability to rent or lease a car in the company name. So we're talking above your secretaries, schedulers, things like that. Those people generally should not be an exempt employee. And again, have this reviewed if you have any questions. But the second part of being an exempt employee, right now to be an exempt employee, the first part of that process is they have to be paid at least, I think it's about $26,000. That's a pretty low standard. As of December 1, they're changing that number. As of December 1st, you have to pay your employees at least $47,476 for them to be exempt from overtime. There are a few very, very narrow exceptions to that, but the bulk of the employers are going to be affected by this. So if you're not paying your employee at least that amount, give me a call after, shoot me an email, but they probably need to be a non-exempt employee. So just kind of a little aside, that's something you have to pay attention to when you're hiring. Is this going to be an exempt, non-exempt? Is this an employee or an independent contractor? So you decided you're hiring this employee. Kind of getting back to my slides now. What do you pay them? Denver and Colorado right now is a really competitive market for employers. There's employees out there, but they're few and far between. We were at full employment for just back in December. The numbers I saw today have gone down a little bit, but it's still a competitive industry. So you want to make sure you're paying these people and attracting the right kind of candidate to your job. To figure out what you need to pay them, especially if you're hiring your first employee, don't just throw a dart at the wall and that's what you pay them. There's a couple websites listed here, salary.com, Indeed. See what other people in your area are posting. Look at the same job title and your location and see what the going rate is, because you want to be competitive. It also doesn't hurt to take a look at their job postings and see what they're saying and what their benefits are and what they're offering these employees, because you want to attract the best candidates, your rock stars. And so this is the first step in making sure that you're an attractive place to work for those employees. when you're developing this job post, you really want to sell yourself. Why are you a great place to work? Not post the job description. This is a trap I see a lot of employers falling into. You don't want to put your job description up there for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of dry reading. It's not selling yourself. It's not selling the business. It's bullet points of specific jobs and duties. That's hard to read. Secondly, it's a legal document. I wouldn't suggest putting that out there for all your competitors to see as well. What I like to begin with when I compose my help wanted ad, I start with a question that kind of draws them in. Do you love figuring out a tough problem? Are numbers your thing? Customer service really gets your mojo going. Sounds a little corny, but you want something to draw them in, again, to attract them. Describe your team. How big are you? Are you small business? Large business? Use adjectives to really sell yourself. I'm going to say that several times. The job post is just about attracting, it's not just about attracting candidates, it's about attracting the right candidates for your business. I don't also suggest bullet points either, because somebody might just be scanning it and see a couple things and keep going. Draw them in with a paragraph, write something out. Don't compose a short story. It only needs to be about a paragraph long. Again, this is all about selling your culture, your environment, making sure you're getting those right people to apply. I do include a short, I don't include the job description, but I do include a high-level description of the job. So this, again, is your 30,000-foot view, couple sentences. Don't get into the nitty-gritty. This is not the time or place for that. It's up to you if you want to do a blind or anonymous job posting or put your company logo up with the job post. I don't think it affects the job seeker, but make sure when you do that and you call them later for an interview that you identify yourself, because it's very important and you know which job they applied to and which one they're being called about right then. Some of these job websites have features where you don't have to aggregate all these resumes. You can just put a questionnaire online and have candidates fill it out. So you can help limit your phone calls because you can ask a lot of yes-no questions and you can weed out candidates pretty quickly. Always make sure to ask their name, their phone number, their email, their past experiences, and then informational questions. Tell me about this time when, what happened when you had a difficult manager. Ask those questions that make them dig a little deeper. Don't just scratch the surface of what are your biggest weaknesses. Have them dig into it, give you examples. Those are the sort of questions you want to ask in forms like that. This slide has a couple of some of the bigger posting sites, ZipRecruiter, Bullhorn, RecruiterBox. I have personally used ZipRecruiter and RecruiterBox several times. So what these sites do is you put your job post up there and they send it out to the job posting sites, such as Monster, Indeed, Craigslist, LinkedIn, sites like that. And then all the resumes come to this website. So you'll be able to get into, say, ZipRecruiter and see all the websites in one place. Oftentimes they have features where you can add notes, you can reject, you can schedule for interviews, and you can use these systems to do that. The other benefit is if you have a large hiring team of maybe 2-3 people, everyone can see them. Instead of the emails just coming to one person, everyone can log into, say, ZipRecruiter and see the resumes available. These are some of the bigger posting sites if you just want to go straight to the site, Indeed, Craigslist, Monster. And when deciding where to post, what I would encourage you to do is look at your industry. Get on these sites. If you're a service industry, maybe Craigslist is the place to go. If you're maybe looking for someone a little more professional, a little white collar, I think LinkedIn might be the place. One website that's not listed on here that's specific to Colorado that I think has a lot of good things to offer, although I think it is a little pricey, called Andrew Hudson's Job List. They send out a weekly email of jobs in the area. And I know a lot of job seekers, my friends, people I've worked with that actually use that site. So that's another one to consider. Just as another kind of aside, if you're posting to Craigslist and you think it's going to get picked up to Indeed, I've talked to a Craigslist account representative, and I don't know why the relationship between those two websites is advantage. But sometimes Indeed won't pick up the Craigslist ads post. So if you post a Craigslist thinking it'll show up on Indeed, don't make that assumption, just kind of as a aside. And here's some more. These are a little more esoteric websites that you can use to post. Again, just look at your job, your industry, and see where the best place to post is. So now you've created this beautiful job post, you've got it online, and candidates are rolling in. Very, very exciting, right? Well, you're going to get a lot of resumes, and generally a large portion of those are not going to be good fits. So I generally divide my piles into three. One, the yeses, the maybes, and the heck no. And what I look for is I look for someone who has 80% for 20%, you can teach. So the people who have the 80% of what I'm looking for go in my yes pile. Something I always tell employers and something I always look for. You can teach a lot of skills. You cannot teach things such as hard work, personality, integrity. So I put a higher value on those sorts of things than things such as they can use this computer program. I have one client, we were hiring a receptionist, and she didn't have the hard skills that we were looking for. She didn't know the computer system. She'd actually never done any customer service in the medical industry. But when I talked to her on the phone, those delightful people, you can just hear the smile in their voice. She just made me feel calm, just fabulous young lady. And so we ended up hiring her, and she's turned into the best receptionist. We were able to teach her the hard skills that she needed to succeed in that job. So please keep that in the back of your mind when you're hiring somebody. Sometimes those intangible skills that you can't teach are worth a heck of a lot more than those hard skills. So now you've got your resumes, you've got your yeses. The first step I always encourage people to do is to do a phone interview. Give them a call. Don't automatically assume that they're available to talk to you right then. I see a lot of employers make this mistake. If the candidate is in Walmart, checking out at Costco, they're not going to be able to put their best foot forward because their mind's going to be elsewhere. So always ask them, is it a good time to chat? If it is, go ahead and proceed with the interview. If not, arrange a time to call them back. And also give them the website so they have a chance to learn a little bit more about your business so they can ask you intelligent questions when you talk to them. When I'm doing this phone screen, this phone interview, one of the steps I always do, without exception, is I walk through people's resumes with them. I start at the beginning of their work history and work my way up to the present. And for each job, I have them describe what they did, what were their jobs and duties, and then also why they left. That, to me, why they left is the biggest telling question you can ask somebody, because you're going to learn if they have an adversarial history with employers, or if they were just a temp, and that's why it looks like their job history is so broad and so short. They've got all these jobs 3 months at a time while they were working for a temp agency. So you really need to ask why they left those jobs, and that's perfectly legal. And you'll learn a lot. You'll see, pay attention to what they say to you for each job and what they have on their resume. I've seen people, what they tell me and what's on their resume does not match up. So always kind of a true barometer for me. After you kind of go through the phone interview and you've ascertained, hey, sounds like they know what they're talking about, they seem like they might be a good fit. They also are able to speak English or whatever language you need them to speak. You can understand them, they can put a sentence together, all those wonderful things. And after they pass that first hurdle, that's when I bring them in for an in-person interview. Part of the in-person interview process is just making sure, they don't have a 4-letter word tattooed across their forehead, or they have blue hair and they're trying to go into the funeral industry. The other part is to really get to know them face-to-face and on a personal level. So when you're setting up this in-person interview, you need to first decide who's going to sit in the interview. Is it going to be you and just the candidate? 2 people and the candidate? How many people are going to be there? And keep in mind, you don't want to overwhelm the candidate. You don't want to have 6 people sitting across from them because, again, they're just going to be a nervous wreck. So it can be really difficult for an employee, or excuse me, a candidate. Always have them fill out a job application. 1, this is for your employee files. But 2, again, it's kind of a truth barometer for me. Are what they're putting on the application what matches their resume. Give them a copy of the job description so they know the specifics of the job they're looking for, that they applied for. You can also do testing. This is something more for, I would say, maybe like an electrician, and you want to ascertain their skills. Go ahead and put them through a small practical test. That's not a problem, but it's not something I see a lot of tools employers use, and that's fine. Also keep in mind, they're interviewing you too. If I walk in to interview for a job and the receptionist is rude to me and, I'm sitting in a busy room trying to interview, I'm not going to have a good impression of that business. And going back to what I said earlier, it's a very competitive job market in Colorado right now. So keep in mind, as much as you're interviewing them, they're also interviewing you, so put your best foot forward. I also encourage people to ask behavioral interviewing questions. So these are the questions. Tell me about a situation when you had to use your own discretion. Tell me about a time you worked for a difficult boss. These are the questions to get away from maybe those pat questions that everyone gets asked in the interview. When you ask questions such as, what's your biggest weakness? Any good job applicant is going to have studied that question ahead of time and developed a canned answer, and that's what you're going to get, this canned answer. They're rehearsed what they're going to say. You're not getting the essence of that person and that true nature of that individual. Another benefit of the behavioral interview questions is getting them off the script. And this is when you're really going to find out the most valuable information about somebody. I was interviewing someone for a job, and we were asking questions, and clearly she had a script for the questions she knew were coming. But when we got off script, man, the answers she gave were just off the wall batty. And we started digging, and she, talking about how she's suing her current employer and da 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 da. And to me, that's an immediate red flag, because if she's litigious against her current employer, there's no guarantee she won't be litigious against us in the future. So give them some rope, because I hate to say it, sometimes they'll kind of hang themselves. They'll say things that are red flags to you, and listen to your gut. If you hear things that make you nervous that are red flags, you'd probably pass on that candidate, or talk to the interviewer who may be interviewing with you and see if they felt those same vibes, because oftentimes I've heard many times, well, in the interview I wasn't quite sure, or I was a little worried about this, and before you know it becomes a huge issue, and we're having to either discipline or terminate somebody based on the warning signs they saw in the interview. Lastly, when you're interviewing them, the question I get a lot is, what can you ask them? What's legal, what's not? In the United States and in Colorado, there are several protected classes, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with these, at least in theory: age, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, things of that nature. You don't want to ask questions that can give you an answer that could bias you. So questions such as, what year did you graduate? It seems like an innocent question. So if you ask them what year they graduate, you're going to be able to infer their age from that, and age is a protected class. That's an unusual last name. Where is it from? Again, this is a question that seems innocent on its face. You might just be trying to get the applicant to know them better. But, if you're asking them where their name is from, and they're like, oh, it's German, you're learning their national origin, and that's, again, a protected class. Other questions you can't ask: are you planning to have kids? Are you married? Are you on any medication? Do you have any pre-existing health conditions? What is your religious affiliation? Do you celebrate any religious holidays? Have you ever been arrested is actually a question you cannot ask. You can ask, have you been convicted of a crime? You cannot ask, have you been arrested? Another question you can't ask: are you a U.S. citizen? The correct question to ask is, are you authorized to work in the U.S. for any employer? So again, when you're asking these questions, make sure you're not violating any of these protected classes. So you've been through the in-person interview with them. You think they might be a strong candidate. Let's talk about reference checks, background checks, and drug testing. Reference checks is when you call a person's either personal references they provide, past employer, a business reference they might have, and check to see that they think this person is a good fit for your company. Now, I always caution a grain of salt here. If you're calling their past employer, there might only be a few questions they ask. As an HR professional, what I recommend my clients when someone calls them for a reference is to only answer a few questions. Did that person work there? When did they work there for you? What was their starting and ending salary? And are they eligible or not for rehire? And those are the only questions I like my clients to answer. So if you call a company and they only answer those questions, question of most value to you as an employer is probably, are they eligible or not for rehire? This is where I caution you, because some companies have a policy that no one who's worked for them in the past is ever eligible for rehire. They'll never bring back a past employee. So when they answer no to that question, to you as a hiring manager, it might seem on its face that they're a bad employee and that they're done. But keep in mind, that might not be the case. It might just be company policy that, no, they're not eligible for rehire. So take those answers with a grain of salt and realize you might not get a lot of answers. Because again, there's only a few things I would ever tell my clients to answer. Background checks are another, can be a possible danger zone for people. It's kind of a double-edged sword what you learn about somebody, because again, if it's something that related to those protected classes, you decide not to hire them or you decide to terminate them down the line, you might be sued for discrimination because you knew these things about them. Keep in mind with background checks, you have to take into account how long ago, if there was any crime in their history, any convictions, how long ago these happened and what they were for. If it's for something that's unrelated to your business, it's really not good policy for you to immediately discard that person just because they have a conviction in their past. And just kind of as a heads up, in Colorado right now, we do not have this law, but it's kind of been a movement across the country. And I think about 14 states now have passed laws and many, many counties and municipalities. So I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado followed this trend in a few years. It's something called ban the box. What it means is employers cannot ask about a person's background check until they interview somebody. So they can't ask, do you have any arrests? You can never ask, do you have any arrests? But you cannot ask about their conviction record until after you've interviewed them. I know a lot of job applications I see from people have that question on there. In those states where the ban the boxes have been passed, they have to remove that question and wait till after they interview somebody before they can ask that question. So just a heads up, it's not applicable to Colorado yet, but start thinking about your hiring practices, because I would not be surprised if that came to pass in the next few years here. Lastly, and especially in Colorado, kind of a hot button topic, drug testing, especially related to marijuana. What I always tell people is you have to treat people the same, no matter if it's your best employee or if it's, if someone tests positive for marijuana and your policy is you do not hire somebody for marijuana. I don't care if what sob story they tell you that they don't smoke and their brother does and they just live in the same house and that's how they test positive. You have to treat every positive the same. So just a heads up. Make sure you're paying attention to that and you have a strong policy for your existing employees regarding that. So now you think you found your candidate, you've narrowed it down, this one stands out, you think this is your rock star. You need to extend the offer to them. The way I like to do this is I give them a call, talk to them, say, we'd like to hire you, here's what we're offering. Do not send offer letters. Again, this is a pitfall I see a lot of companies fall into. They want to send this documentation, and in theory, it's a lovely idea. But the problem is 49 of the 50 states are at-will states. Colorado is one of them. What that means is you can fire or they can quit at any time, in theory. But an offer letter, if you're not extremely careful with the language, it becomes a contract of employment, and therefore there's no longer at-will. So be very careful. I would not suggest ever doing an offer letter. If you need to send out some sort of documentation, I would do something called a welcome letter, which is slightly different. But what to send them instead? Again, give them another copy of the job description so they know what the job is about. Other documents you might want to include, though, are non-compete and confidentiality agreements. Confidentiality agreements I would consider doing with all your employees. This is what's going to protect your client list, your vendor list, your financials, all those things that employees might come across in the course of their duties that you don't want shared with the outside world. The other document is a non-compete. Non-competes aren't going to be applicable to every industry. So say you have a receptionist and you have them sign a non-compete. That's not really enforceable because you can't have somebody stop looking for a receptionist if they go to a client across, or excuse me, a competitor across the street. Things like doctors, lawyers, those sorts of jobs you can absolutely do a non-compete because you don't want them taking their clientele with them should they ever leave you. So just something to consider if you don't have those documents. When you're hiring or you have existing employees, those are things you might want to put in place. So yay, the candidate accepts the job. This is awesome because now you finally found your rock star. Send rejection letters to candidates that you didn't interview and then the ones that you did interview and ultimately rejected. It's good manners. Just let them know. I'm sure many of you have probably been in the shoes of these people applying for jobs and just never hearing a word back. Take the time to compose a one-sentence, two-sentence email and just let them know that, hey, he's not right for the job. So that, in a nutshell, is all about hiring. It's a big task, and I certainly understand a lot of the nerves and anxiety that comes along with it because it's quite a huge task and a huge responsibility to bring these people on board, trust them with your business, trust them with your livelihood. So take the time when you hire to make sure you're doing it right. Don't rush the process. When I see people trying to hire in a hurry, their hair's on fire, that's when a lot of hiring mistakes are made. Take your time, make sure you're finding people that fit, most importantly, with your culture. So thank you guys so much. Just kind of as a shameless plug, one of the services Symmetry offers is we have something called the PRC, the People Resource Center. With that, it's a $50 monthly fee. Clients get unlimited phone calls, emails to a dedicated team. We're all ex-attorneys, as we like to joke. So, and we review your documentation, we'll talk you through issues, and we'll help you with all things HR related. With that, are there any questions?
So Carli, it sounded like you cut out a little bit here towards the end. So you mentioned instead of sending an offer letter, you had a different title as far as that kind of a document that you would send. And so we had a question around that document and what that was called again.
Oh, I apologize for the technical issues. Instead of an offer letter, I would send out a welcome letter. It's going to include some of the same stuff, the job title, who they report to, the wage or salary this person might earn, but it's not gonna, it's kind of hard to explain, but the welcome letter language is not going to offer that sort of contract of employment. So you want to, it's just something, a welcome letter is just something that, hey, welcome, here's the basics. Not, we want to offer you this job, and here's what we're offering you, because then it becomes a negotiation in a contract.
Awesome. Thank you. And just for a couple other questions here, as people are maybe composing some of their thoughts towards the presentation. So when we look about this, we have our rock star. What is maybe something during an interview process or once they come on board, but to retain that rock star? You put in all this effort to go ahead and hire them and find that individual. But is there any suggestions that you have for our small business owners about then maintaining and retaining the relationship that you have with that individual?
That's a great question. Retention can be tough. And one of my favorite things to do is to poll the employees, whether that's a survey monkey, you have someone sit down with everyone one-on-one, sit down with them and see what's going on, how things are going. Create that environment that they can come to you with issues. Because you might hear things that, hey, they're really unhappy about this, and you know, and sometimes it's little fixes that can really save your company. I had one client that the company was very unhappy with their benefits they were offered, very unhappy, and of course the company didn't have a lot of money to, you know, offer them a better health plan or, you know, start doing company matching for their 401k, and that's totally understandable. But what we ended up doing is we did a survey monkey with all the employees and asked them what was important to them, what was valuable to them. And actually what we discovered is they really wanted pet insurance, which sounds silly. And I think it came to about $30 a month for the employer. And it so helped these employees' happiness and their contentment in their job that it really helped their retention efforts overall. So make sure you're in touch with your employees about, what's right, what's wrong, not just benefits. Are the managers responsive to their questions? Are they getting the tools and trainings they need to succeed? Because you might find there's things, easy little fixes you can make, or like pet insurance, low-cost solutions that you can put in place that will really help retain those employees.
Awesome. Thank you for all of the great suggestions. And then one other question that I have that I know some of our clients ask when they come in are, what are maybe just 5 strong interview questions? Because I know when you're interviewing, you're going through that process, you don't want to make sure that you're leading somebody, but you want to make sure that you're encouraging them, right? Because you talked about, and you had mentioned that sometimes people feel overwhelmed maybe in the interview process. So what would be your recommendation to our business owners, maybe just 5 strong interview questions that they can then employ as they're out here and really searching for that rock star?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I can give you 5 just clear questions, but the things I would really consider doing is, again, walk through the resume and always ask why they left the position. That, to me, is one of the most valuable questions you can ask. And then the other is to tailor these behavioral, situational questions for your business. So if you're hiring somebody to work under a manager who's maybe difficult, ask a question related to that, because you're going to get a good feel then for how that person works. Or you have a manager who likes to micromanage. Ask the candidate, tell me about a time you were micromanaged and how you dealt with that, or how you earned the trust of your superior. Tailor those questions to your business, to the manager, to the situation that they're going to be put into, so you can see how they react. If they're not doing sales, don't ask a question about, tell me about a time you did sales. But again, I just really encourage you to ask those questions that are going to be, I wouldn't say unconventional, but are a little, that aren't going to allow the candidate to sit at home the night before and come up with a script and come up with answers that you think you're going to want to hear, whether they're true or not.
Always keep your interviewee on their toes. Maybe that would be an element to include as part of their interviews.
That's a great way to put it, because that's really when you're going to see the essence of a person, when they're maybe even made a little bit uncomfortable, that they can't just fall back on these answers they have planned out. That's when you're really going to see the essence of that person. You're going to see a lot more clearly how they answer things, how they respond to things, and how ultimately they would fit into your business.
Wonderful. And one last element here that I just, for our listeners who have some maybe exempt or non-exempt staff and they're looking at that process, you spoke a little bit to the changes that are coming down the line December 1st, but for everybody out there, just as another area to follow up, where would be a great resource for them to go ahead and access that information so that they can continue to educate themselves on those changes?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is coming, and I encourage anyone who's going to be affected by this to really start planning now, because it might require your employees to start clocking in. It might require a change in their salary. It might require a couple of different things. So as these changes kind of come up, you need to be able to manage them, and you don't want to be in a panic December 1 trying to, oh, you needed to clock in today. Maybe get them warmed up to that maybe a couple of weeks ahead of time. The Department of Labor website has a great fact sheet. It can be a little dense and a little difficult to work through. I'm more than happy to take any questions. I put my contact info up there. Feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'm happy to talk through it with people, because it is a big change coming, and it's going to affect a lot of people. This number, this 47,476 that this number is going up to, it's going to be reviewed every 3 years. So it's not going to be a static number. We're going to have to continually adjust and make sure that, we're making sure these people are paid the required salary so they can be exempt from overtime. It's a big deal, and it's a big change, and I just encourage everyone to be aware, be cognizant, and plan for it now so that panic doesn't happen and that you're compliant when that December 1 date hits. Because it's a human resources related lawsuits and audits are up, I don't even know the percentage off the top of my head, but it's massive. It's kind of the modern day gold rush. If you sit at home during the day, there's a lot of commercials on TV for maybe those slightly disingenuous lawyers looking for an easy payday. Audits by the state and federal government are a huge source of income for both. Auditors, I think, make about 3 times their salary in audits every year. So I don't want to say they're looking for people to audit, but it's a good source of revenue for the state and for the federal government. So these audits happen. If they haven't happened to you yet, that's fantastic. But once this law goes in place, I fully expect the number of audits to go up on employees. So I actually encourage everyone, if you have employees currently exempt, non-exempt, now's a good time to review to make sure not only their salary is going to meet the basis, but that their duties also meet the threshold to be classified as an exempt employee.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for your time and your presentation today. It doesn't look like anybody else has submitted any questions, so we'll be going ahead and ending a little bit early. Just reiterating Carli's invitation, I would recommend everybody take advantage of the opportunities that you have to work with and to inquire of her and to get some of your questions answered. In addition to that, the East Colorado SBDC is one of 14 offices in the state of Colorado, so we cover quite a large region here, and if you have any questions concerning your small business and business practices, we do offer free confidential consulting, and even if our office isn't the best office to connect you with, given your geographical location, we'd be more than happy to direct you to the SBDC office within your area. I'd also just like to take a minute here to invite everybody to attend a presentation that we have upcoming in Loveland on November 3rd. This is the first time that the East Colorado SBDC and the Larimer SBDC are able to join together on a joint women's conference. And for those men who are listening, it's not women exclusive, but we will be really just showcasing women entrepreneurs within the state of Colorado. And so we would again invite you to engage in that presentation, and that will be an all-day conference upcoming Thursday, November 3rd. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me via those. And again, thank you so much, Carli, and thank you to Symmetry Consulting for all that you do. And without any further ado, everybody enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.